Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview. I'm Andrew Musgrove and as usual joined by John Gibson, and it's Borussia Dortmund, the visitors to St James's Park on Wednesday in the Champions League. Another sentence, John, that I didn't think I'd be saying this early on in the project. Another sentence that still doesn't seem all that real. Just how excited are you to be welcoming
Ah,
Borussia Dortmund to Tyneside?
fabulous, absolutely fabulous, because the Champions League is something extra special. And the way we've approached the Champions League and the results we've got, I mean, anticipation for the Borussia Dortmund game is absolutely sky high. Expe- Expectations are also raised because we were so wonderful last time out, 4-1 Paris Saint Germain. If you take a form line through it, they lost on the opening day 2-0 to Paris, albeit in Paris, and we were at home. But yes, I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? Not only did we make the Champions League in one season after being relegation for it, but right now, as we go to what will be the halfway stage of the groups uh, by the time this game's over, this is a game. Would we have ever said this? To be truthful, Andrew, this is a game of top v bottom, and we're the ones top and they're the ones bottom. If the table, I know it's early doors, and I know we can get. Some people say we're getting carried away, but we've got a right to be carried away after the length of time we've waited. We've won one, drawn one. Goals record is 4-1. They've drawn one, lost one, and haven't scored at all. So, I mean, to be able to say that, I'm not underestimating them by any chance. I isn't that, but to be able to say that, I just wanted to say it, to hear myself saying it, because it's terrific. We are not just in the Champions League, we're top of the group.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And to be talking about Borussia Dortmund coming to Tyneside, and like you say, we're not underestimating them, but we're not fearing this game.
No, not at
I
all.
think when Paris arrived, you were kind of thinking, okay, look, very good side, and we'll see what we can get out of it. Newcastle are good, but Paris are Paris. But after watching Newcastle just dismantle PSG and the form they've got in the Premier League, yes, Borussia Dortmund are still one of the best sides in Europe, but I think they'll be coming to St James's Park more wary of what might happen to them than rather than
Yes.
Eddie Howe fearing what might happen to Newcastle United.
Yeah, I mean, for them, it's a must win game. They've only got 1 point out of six. They can't stand 1 point out of nine, else they're going out. So for them, they're playing catch up, having not had a win yet, having not had a draw yet. And so they will be much more apprehensive than we are, to bring a sense of reality to the occasion. And I'm not sure I want to bring a sense of reality because I enjoy just basking in it all. But this lot will work harder than Paris Saint Germain did. They lived on their egos. They had all the big stars, but did they want to be there? I mean, did Mapapi want to be here? Not at Newcastle. I mean, with Paris Saint Germain. And when the going went against them, a lot of them just stuck their hand. You won't find Borussia Dortmund doing that. They will fight from the first whistle to the last whistle. So in some ways, they'll be much more dangerous than Paris Saint Germain were.
Yes, indeed. And I think they would have watched the PSG game and also kind of seen the impact that the crowd had and the atmosphere
Yeah.
that was inside the ground, the way that Newcastle United players wanted the ball more, straight away that first challenge and whipping the crowd up. And they would have taken lessons away from the way PSG approached the game because in many ways I think PSG underestimated what that 12th man, you know, brought to the game
Absolutely.
and also just the desire and want of this Newcastle United squad. And, in many ways, it's no longer a secret. So you will think Borussia Dortmund will definitely be aware and definitely know what to expect. And it's interesting there, John, you mentioned about the fact that they've got the win because, as you say, they've only got a point on the board. And
Yeah,
already, some of their star players are talking about how much this game means. And you've got Julian Brandt, who's arguably, their star player at the moment, a left winger. He scored at the weekend, scored the only goal against Werder Bremen. And he has said the group is so wild that anything can happen, but we absolutely need a victory. Now, look, he's probably always going to say that, some would argue. But the fact that he is saying that, I mean, they're well aware this is a must-win game. How much pressure is that putting on themselves?
Huge, huge pressure because it's away from home. The way the ball's bounced, they've only got 1 point and they're playing away from home at the most passionate club in their group. Funnily enough, Andrew, the next game, we'll find out their passion because unless they're so far deflated by the result up here, and please let that be so, they get 80,000 and they're really a fan-based club and they will produce the yellow wall, etc. They'll produce this a heck of an atmosphere in their own stadium for us to face, which makes it in some ways a must-win for us because if we are going to get through, we're going to get through on home results. We've got to try to win my 3 home games and anything away is a bonus. So we want to win this because after this, 2 of the 3 games we've got are away from home. And they will produce and whip up a tremendous atmosphere in Dortmund. So we've possibly got the best 2 lots of fans in our group playing each other. And interesting that they took the full allocation of tickets. Paris Saint-Germain didn't. So that shows how blasé that club is. This will be tough. We've also got to remember that domestically, they're in as good a form as us. They have played 8 games in the Bundesliga. They've won 6, drawn 2, lost none. We, in my last 8 games in the leagues and cup, have got exactly the same record: 6 wins and 2 defeats. I was having a little smile when I was reading about the Borussia Dortmund and what critics were saying in Germany. They said, well, they've won 6 out of 8 now unbeaten, but they haven't played too well. I bet they're not too worried about that. I mean, results are top rate. Now, if they can play scrappy at Newcastle and win, they would be thrilled to bits. The ultimate is to play wonderfully and win, as we did against Crystal Palace. But if you can't, you go for the result rather than the performance.
Yeah, do you think? I mean, you do, and like you say, the result is what matters in the end. And Newcastle play rubbish on Wednesday and still get the win, then we'll all be smiling at the end of it. Do you think, though, the fact that PSG have seen Newcastle just dismantle, Borussia Dortmund have seen Newcastle just dismantle PSG with relative ease, will they be scared, or will they be fearing coming to Tyneside?
Oh, they've got to be, because if you watch that game, I mean, there's loads of games where you get a surprise result, um, and maybe it's a decent performance. But the whole of that night clicked into what was perfection. The atmosphere on the terraces with war flags, the anticipation of the crowd, the electricity that was felt before a ball was kicked. I mean, that turned every Newcastle player into a giant. I mean, Kieran Trippier was 6'8", the same as Byrne, and he's normally lucky to be 5'8", bless him. But what a player! And everybody turned into a giant that night because the atmosphere was perfect, and that's what'll worry them. They could dismiss Paris Saint-Germain. It was a one-off good day for Newcastle. Paris Saint-Germain weren't at the races. We needn't fear too much. That was unrealistic. If they watched the video of it, and by the way, if I was their manager, I'm not certain I would show the players the video. They might be terrified before they come here. If you showed them the video and Newcastle were able to produce the same sort of performance, both on the pitch and on the terraces, then they're in big trouble. Of course, they'll be afraid. They've got to be afraid. They're human beings.
And I do wonder whether the teams like Borussia Dortmund, like AC Milan, like PSG, I mean, they wouldn't admit this publicly, but they looked at Newcastle as the weak link. They looked at Newcastle as the team most likely that they were going to maybe bag 6 points off. And Newcastle have gone to Milan and they defended well. They got the point. They've then just, absolutely destroyed PSG. It could have been more than 4. They dominated. It wasn't a lucky performance by any stretch of the means. It was a well-planned, well-executed victory. And I do wonder now whether the likes of Borussia Dortmund, Milan, PSG are kind of, they're eating their own words because especially that game against PSG and the performance, that was the moment I think a lot of people stood up and took notice and thought, okay, Newcastle aren't just here to make up the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, of course, to the rest of Europe, we were ranked outsiders. We're in the outsiders pot. We're in pot four, which is where they put all the duck eggs normally. And all right, it was said we are the most powerful side there was in pot four, but nonetheless, we're in pot four. We'd never been in the Champions League for 20 years. We suddenly get fourth after being in a relegation fight for a decade and a half. I mean, a lot of Europe would think that was a fluke season, like when we finished fifth under Ashley and Pardew. That was a fluke season. But last season wasn't a fluke season with this Newcastle United side and Newcastle United owners and management. And I think there was a little bit of unease that we might be better than everything suggested, but nobody thought it would be as good as this. Let me add, because I'm like all of us, I'm a Geordie, and then cynicism kicks in and apprehension kicks in because of the way the years have gone by. This will be a tough match. Their home record's great. The difference between the two sides at the moment is Newcastle United in Europe and Borussia Dortmund in Europe. There's a significant gap in the performances there. But domestically, they are unbeaten. And domestically, we are top form. So it is not going to be easy. And as I say, they will fight a lot more than Paris Saint-Germain. Mind, most sides would fight a lot more than Paris Saint-Germain. And it is the German way anyway. You know, to be confrontational and to give you a battle for an hour and a half. So it will be a tough match. But everything being equal, Newcastle have got an undoubted edge in order to come out on top.
How key is it, do you think, for Eddie Howe and his Newcastle United side that from their point of view, and then we'll get into the fans' point of view, but from the players' point of view and the coach and stuff, that there doesn't seem to be this element of fear of these big clubs. Now, is it difficult for Eddie Howe to make sure complacency doesn't come in? Because sometimes if you're fearful, you're more on your toes, you're more aware, you can be more focused. Or do you think he's got them in such good shape that actually he doesn't need that fear factor to make sure
No,
they're
you
in good
do.
shape?
Newcastle don't need the fear factor to make them quality. What he's got to make certain is the exact opposite. That we're not over, and he will make certain, by the way, but that we're not overconfident and think, oh, we've just got to go out there and we'll come off an hour and a half later and we've won. I don't believe for 1 second Newcastle have that in this particular squad. And the wonderful thing I found, they're going into the match in a perfect scenario by the way they dismantled Crystal Palace. Everybody thought, will Newcastle have one eye on Borussia Dortmund and think they can showboat a little bit about Crystal Palace, the great note-noters from last season, 3 notes. Could be difficult. We could be caught on the hop. We just went out there and blew Crystal Palace away. The football was stunning. We were 1 up in 4 minutes. We're 3 up by half time. We showcased after that. We didn't showboat. We didn't show off in the second half. We game plan was brilliant. We just killed the game, and that was the end of that. And we could make the subs. And by the way, I loved the subs. You know why? Because they were quality. How long have we had quality to come off the bench like we had against Palace? Every sub that went on was quality. We've normally got a shallow bench in the past. Every sub was quality. So, that was so lovely to see. And that was with injuries taking out Willock and Barnes and Botman as well. So it shows how different the squad is to what it was then. I think Newcastle are in a groove. They're not a bunch that gets complacent or egotistical, and they don't need fear to win. They've had no fear all season, and they've won 6 of the last 8.
Yeah, very true. And you're right there about the squad depth, and it's great to see Eddie Howe's got the options. Just finally on Dortmund, because now we're going to kind of look at it from the Newcastle point of view, and we have got a view from the opposition coming up via Bundesliga expert Ben McFadden. So that'll be out on Wednesday morning. But John, as a Newcastle United fan, sitting here talking about Borussia Dortmund coming to St James's Park, I have no nervousness in my stomach. There's nothing in the pit of it.
No,
Like,
no.
how did I? Are you? Are you getting used to this feeling where you're kind of just like, okay, this is
It's
Newcastle
absolutely
United?
It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I used to have fear in the pit of my stomach when West Bromwich Albion were coming to St James's Park, oh God, if we don't win this one, we're going to be in a real relegation fight, and it's going to be tough because they're decent and all that sort of nonsense, which is behind us. And isn't that an absolutely wonderful thing? It's a terrific feeling not to have that fear. And one of the reasons we haven't got the fear is we don't expect and we know we won't get complacency. And if we don't get complacency, we are in with a real chance against any side, home or away, whether it's in the Premier League or it's in the Champions League. I don't mean we're going to win every game or anything stupid like that, but we're going to be at the races every time we go out there. And how long is it since we said that? We are at the races, whoever we play. And that is a terrific feeling. And yes, you need a little bit of luck. Like they don't get two in the first 10 minutes because something goes ridiculously wrong. Heaven forbid somebody gets sent off or whatever, whatever. Of course, things can change. But all things being equal, we actually go into this match as favourites in the Champions League against Borussia Dortmund, who only lost the Bundesliga title last season on goal difference. Mind, they had Jude Bellingham in their side then, on goal difference. So, this is no easy push. And we've played AC Milan as 7 times winners, and we've played Paris Saint-Germain with all their record, now Dortmund. And we're more than holding our own. We're in the driving seat, and that is terrific. And that is even probably more than we expected at the end of last season. We've qualified for the Champions League, but by Jove, this is a step up. This is going to be a mountain to climb. Then when we go and get the draw, we're told it's a group of death. It's a wonderful group for fans because every team we're playing has a history and is a terrific team of stature. But it was a group of death because we are supposed to think there's not one of the matches we are going to, the 6 matches we are going to play, we can guarantee winning. And then we'll go out there and it's a whole different ball game. And that is wonderful. And we've got a right to bask in it. The difference is Geordies aren't being big-headed and going around saying this, that, and the other and being stupid. We're being grateful. We're being confident. We're loving it. And the team reflects that feeling of the fans. We're not suddenly thinking we're big time Charlies and therefore we'll get a pancake in our face in one of these games. We're going out, enjoying the occasion. The occasion's been earned and known there's enough talent within the team, plus enough desire to make us competitive every game we play.
Yeah, indeed, and it is just fantastic to be welcoming such giants to Tyneside and saying, "Come on, then let's play the game." Yeah, it's just tremendous, and I can't wait to see how Wednesday plays out. In terms of Newcastle, then, John, you mentioned there the Crystal Palace game. There were a few changes made. I suppose the one that really stood out was Jacob Murphy in for
Yeah.
Miguel Almiron. Almiron came on, had a chance to score. Some actual great defending for once in the game from Tyreek Mitchell, who had an awful game otherwise, but he did manage to stop Almiron getting that shot off as well as he would have liked. I suppose that's the big question, I think, of the starting 11, John, is it Jacob Murphy or is it Miguel Almiron on Wednesday?
That's the big decision for Eddie. I mean, normally he is very susceptible to spreading the load when it is sort of weekend, midweek, weekend. Um, but if I had to take out a crystal ball, and I mean, when we do that, nobody ever gets it right because all the guessing of the team to play Palace, we got 10 of the 11 right. But then he throws in Murphy, which is a total out of the blue curveball, and it's a different setup. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think Pope's naturally the goalkeeper. The back four will be the same with no Bachman, which means Lascelles continues in there. The midfield, I would suggest, would be the same, which Longstaff, Bruno, and Joe Linton, if the feeling is he can play 2 games in 4 days, having had this long spell off before that. And of course, he could start and come off later. Anderson's the cover there. Then the situation is up the front three. And the biggest one out of that is Almiron or Murphy. And of course, Gordon's automatic on the left hand side. And I think he'll play Isaac for Wilson. I don't think he'll try to give Wilson 2 games in 4 days. I know
Now,
you're going to say he's not.
no. Well, I was going to ask you quick because we were talking about this on the Monday show yesterday, and one of the listeners said that they felt the Miguel Almiron and Jacob Murphy decision is largely based on who plays up front. So their argument was, well, Murphy benefits Wilson better, but Miggy benefits Isaac better. I'm just wondering, do you agree with that at all?
Not particularly, and I don't mean that nationally, and it's a good point of view, and the guy had an absolute right to have that point of view. I don't think it's about in tandem. I think Murphy and Almiron are 2 quality, pacey wingers, and they can alternate in the same way as Isaac and Wilson, who are 2 very different types of centre forward, can alternate. I just think he'll start Isaac. I think he had this in mind before Palace. Look, Isaac's not quite right. He's had a knock. He's pulled out of Sweden. At long last, Callum is right and has been training for a fortnight, hasn't been away. We'll start with Callum and then we'll switch it on Wednesday because the situation is very different with Almiron and Murphy. You haven't got to nurse one of them in the way you've got to nurse Callum Wilson. They're both fit. It's a straight choice, and they both stay fit, etc. With Callum, he played for a long time in that match. I was thrilled to bits he got his goal with his last kick before he come off, and Isaac was already standing on the touchline when he scored. But I was pleased with that. But I think Eddie's intention was always, let's get the best out of Callum against Crystal Palace. Let's win that game. Then I'll bring Isaac in, and Callum's on the bench. And the certainty is that both of them will get pitch time against Dortmund, but I think he'll start with Isaac. I just happen to feel, for no particular reason, that he'll start with Almiron. And that's no slight against Murphy, who thoroughly justified, I thought he was sensational, thoroughly justified his selection, not just with his goal in 4 minutes and not whether he meant it or not, but his pace. I mean, the left back, I mean, he nearly screwed himself into the ground. He didn't have the greatest day or cover himself in glory, but Murphy piled the misery on him.
Yeah, no, he did, and 2 assists for Murphy as well as the goal. And I said on the Monday show that if it was me making the decisions, I'd play Murphy on the right wing, but I do think he'll play Almiron. I think that was what the initial plan was. I think it's absolutely fantastic that actually they go into training on that Sunday morning and Murphy can quite rightly kind of say, hey, boss, I've given you something to think about now, because I'm putting that man of the match performance up top. I think it'll be Isaac. Aaron Stokes said he would play the same team that played on Saturday, and I agreed with him as well. But I do think it'll be Isaac simply because, as you say, John, they've got to manage Callum Wilson, but it's not a bad option to bring off the bench because I don't think he'll be injured or carrying a knock. I think they just realise the long-term strategy is you've got to nurse them. So
if you put 2 games onto Callum's fragile frame, he wouldn't admit it's fragile, but of course it is. That's why he's not in the England squad at the moment. But if you put 2 games in 4 days onto that frame, bearing in mind we've got to go to Wolves on at the weekend after Dortmund. We're not thinking of Wolves yet, but we have to. Then we've got to spread the load. And we're in a wonderful position where we've got 2 people that can play through the middle striker. They are both internationals and both very, very capable. But in some ways, Isaac's style of play is more suited to Europe than Callum Wilson's is. And Callum Wilson's is very much suited to the Premier League. So, I mean, I think for what it's worth, and it doesn't matter, for what it's worth, he'll go Almiron, Isaac, Gordon. But if he went Murphy, Wilson, Gordon, I wouldn't be crying into my beer. I would say we'll still win. But that's what I think he'll do.
And I just want to pick you up on something that you just said a moment ago about Almiron and Murphy being 2 quality wingers. And I think a lot of people will hear that and maybe take a moment and a step back and just think, goodness me, what is the magic that Eddie Howe has in his
Oh,
pocket? Because if we'd
it's
said to
quite
if you'd
incredible.
said to me, yeah, and if we'd said to our listeners, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago,
Laughed at
or
us.
even just when the takeover had happened, that
They
these
laughed
two
at,
players,
laughed at us, Andrew, if we'd suggested their quality. And by the way, at that stage, quite rightly so. But I tell you what, this fella, I mean, somebody bought him a magic wand for last Christmas, didn't they? Because they would have also laughed on us if one of us had said 2 years ago that Joe Linton would become a Brazilian international. People
and
would
Sean
laugh at us.
Longstaff with a shout of an England squad. I mean, there's so many
Oh,
that you can pick.
there's so many you can go down that route, and yes, absolutely
And,
right.
and there's one man I do want to focus on because I had the pleasure of catching the match on Saturday against Palace with your good pal Frank Clark, and he was raving about Jamal Lascelles. And everyone knows I've been a big fan of Lascelles, especially over the last few weeks. I think he stepped up to the plate, and another good performance against Palace. I know he didn't have too much to do, but what he did very well. He looked assured on the ball as well. And then we go back to the game against PSG. He was an absolute man mountain. And again, we're saying about Eddie Howe turning players into superstars. He's done exactly the same with Lascelles. And we're sitting here with our best defender unlikely to feature against one of the best sides in Europe. And yet, we're not, as you would say, John, crying into my beer about it because we're backing Jamal Lascelles to put in another shift, another fantastic performance.
Yeah, Lascelles has done beyond my wildest dreams since he come back into the side. I mean, I'm so like the Geordie in me keeps crossing my fingers and crossing my toes that there's no reverting to nature at some time in the future, inexplicably in one of the games. But I think the mentality that Eddie Howe brings to the team, the positivity he brings to players. And Steve Bruce, not deliberately, but brought negativity to players. He brought a fear factor. He didn't do it deliberately, but they went away fearing what might happen. Lascelles went away, and all he wanted was a big group round him, uh, players either side of him and somebody behind him to cut off the space and etc., because that's the way Newcastle were playing. There's a positivity. People are told, like Joe Linton, like Almiron, like Lascelles, like Longstaff, you can be quality. You've got no reason to fear at this level. And then that becomes the thing. Now, the secret with Lascelles is the same as the secret with Byrne, and that is do the simple things well and keep it simple. Don't suddenly decide you have a ball playing centre half, come out from the back with the ball too often, flick it up your trouser leg, try to hit a Messi pass or a Beckham pass to that and the other. Don't dwell too long on the ball. Do the simple things well, and you're an effective player. That's what Byrne does. That's what Lascelles does now. But don't suddenly decide that you're Maxi and you want to go on a mazy run and flick it up your trouser leg, and because then you will get very, very, very exposed.
Or don't suddenly think that you're Fabian Cher and can do that because he can
Because he
do it.
can.
Maybe not, maybe not Jamal Lascelles, but yeah, tremendous to see him doing so well, and it's just another tip to
And by the
the
way,
coach staff.
Frank would love him and go on about him because we got him from Nottingham Forest, which is Frank's other club, of course.
Yes, exactly.
Um,
Exactly, and but yeah, a tip to Eddie Howe and the coaching staff, and of course the hard work and determination of these players who knew they probably weren't at a high level, but like you, John, like me, I guess no one, Joe Linton, Sean Longstaff, Jamal Lascelles included, thought they'd be playing in the Champions League with Newcastle United and looking like world beaters. It's still something to get your head
I mean,
around.
the interesting thing, Andrew, is that a lot of these players, like Lascelles, just thinking of Lascelles, come into the team totally out of the blue. You know, they're not getting a sniff. I mean, before he went on this run of successive games, he hadn't been in the team for Youngs. They suddenly come in, they do terrific, but they know that they're going back out when this guy's fit, and they accept that. If you look at the performance Lafamenco had against Manchester City in the League Cup, and he knew he was out the next game because there's a fella called Trippier going to come in. And Paul Dummett was terrific as a left-sided centre half against Manchester City in the League Cup when we beat Man City, and we've never seen him since because that is the way of life at St James's Park at the moment. But it is accepted by the players. This is the wonderful thing about this squad. A squad by definition is 20 odd men. It's not 11. And therefore, there's a lot that are only going to get a sniff every now and again. But they've got to have the right attitude when that chance comes along. Dummett had it, Lafamento had it, and now Lascelles has got it. But Lascelles will, once Botman is up to speed, and he might have a couple of appearances as a sub off the bench just because he's been out quite a while. Once he's up to speed, Lascelles goes back on the bench. But he knows that deep down side. But he's got pride, and all of a sudden, he's flipping captain in Newcastle in the Champions League. That's quite incredible. He couldn't get a game for about a year before that, and now he's captain in Newcastle in the Champions League and a successful Newcastle in the Champions League.
Yeah, and he's captain to most of this unbeaten run that they're on as well. So a tremendous turnaround for Jamal Lascelles. And like you said, just to be able to slip into the team shows you just how hard he must have been working off the pitch. Before I get your result prediction, John, just a word on Sandro Tonali. A lovely reception that he got when he came onto the pitch, when he first went to warm up onto the pitch, and then when at the end as well. At the time of recording, which is just gone 11:30 on Tuesday, he has trained, it is understood, with the squad today because, of course, there's no news of this ban. It is expected in the next 24 hours or so. So it looks like it could be very close to coming, but it might come after tomorrow's game. So he might even be able to feature in the squad against Dortmund, although it did look very much like a goodbye on Saturday. What did you make of the reaction? And you know, if he's able to be in the squad against Dortmund and the ban comes in on Thursday, would you have him in the squad?
You can have 9 in the squad, so but I have him in the squad, but I wouldn't rush to put him on the field. If Joe Linton plays and Anderson is also on the bench, Anderson is the first alternative for the midfield situation. I mean, what happened on Saturday was in lots of ways heartwarming, but I felt it was totally predictable, and I predicted it would be that way. A, he wouldn't start. B, Newcastle would try to get the match won and then bring him on so he could feel the love of the crowd. And that's exactly what happened. When he did come on, I watched him very, very closely. He's a very talented boy, but he still looked as if he had all the cares of the world on his shoulder. And quite rightly, he played the way I expected. He didn't try anything fancy or clever or showboating, and he didn't quite. A lot of the game passed round him, the little short while he was on. I think he's got to get his head clear and he's got to get his ban and he's got to serve it. I mean, if we're brutally truthful, this has been going on for years. We have huge sympathy because in addiction, you must have sympathy and you must help to overcome that in every way possible. But he was doing this at Brezhnev and he's doing it at AC Milan. And there's no question he'd been doing it at Newcastle before the inquiry was made public, because by nature, addicts don't suddenly stop. They continue. So he has. It's very difficult to say he doesn't deserve a ban whatsoever because he's admitted to the whole situation and even betting on football and his own teams, although I hasten to add not to lose, to win. So what's coming's coming. And the sooner, to be truthful, the ban starts, the better for him and the better for us. If I would maybe have him in the 9, but I would look not to put him on against Dortmund. He said his wonderful goodbye. They got him in front of the crowd to feel the warmth that we give our own, because he is one of ours. He's had all that. There's no need to do all that again on Wednesday. I'd play the game straight on Wednesday and hopefully not need Sando, because if the good way the game's going and that there hasn't been injuries. And with Joe Linton back in the squad and Anderson there needing to be called, there's not an urgency to have Tonali involved in the 90 minutes.
There we have it then. How is Wednesday going to go, John?
We're going to win. Newcastle will win. It sounds ludicrous, but it'll be tougher than Paris Saint-Germain, the actual match, because they will fight longer and harder. But I think we'll win. I don't normally give a score because I think a lot of that's silly. It's just confetti in the air. But 2-0 or 2-1, they may well score. They are not to be underestimated. The domestic record's wonderful. They're going to come here desperate for a result. They know what they're facing. They know what the atmosphere is going to be like. If we got an early start like we did against Crystal Palace, it's good night for them. There's no question about that. I think it'll be a ding dong. It'll be another great Champions League night, and I do believe that we'll win it, however tight it may be. The only thing that matters in the Champions League is that you win, and especially our home games. And I do believe we will.
I agree, John. I think Newcastle will pick up all 3 points and take a huge step towards the next stage of the Champions League. Thank you, as always, for popping on and delivering the match preview to you guys listening and watching. Hit subscribe, hit follow through whichever platform you join us through, and head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the build-up to Newcastle United versus Borussia Dortmund. We'll have Eddie Howe's press conference later on Tuesday, and we'll have a live match blog on Wednesday afternoon as well. For myself and John, we'll see you guys very soon.
Take care.